Many first home buyers in the country's hottest property markets have experienced the frustration of cashed-up investors muscling them out. The thwarted parties are casualties of Australia's generous tax concessions to investors. The government's well aware this is annoying a lot of people, and it's promising a housing affordability package in next month's federal budget. But it's resisting the push to overhaul negative gearing and other tax breaks, the very incentives that economists say are driving prices up. Pat McGrath's been investigating just how big a role, or otherwise, investment is playing in the housing affordability crisis.
Melbourne's suburban fringe is supposed to be the kind of place where first home buyers can get a foothold in the market. But it's also luring cashed-up investors like Nero with Jetalek.
It's a nice house.
Yes, it is.
He's meeting a property consultant whose business is riding a wave of unprecedented demand from investors.
We build more than 1,000 homes a year, mainly for investor market only.
Who's buying all this land? Is it investors or...?
Mainly investors.
Now investors are copping the blame for driving up prices and squeezing first home buyers out of the market. A lot of people think property investors, someone like you who owns, what, 2 or 3 properties, you're pushing prices up, you're keeping first home buyers out of the market, and you're the bad guy. Do you feel like the bad guy?
No, actually, no.
Do you feel like it's fair for people to describe this market as dominated by people who are there to make money rather than to have a place to live?
That sort of is always going to happen. People will always find somebody to tell them that somebody else is dominating it because they can do it. So what they need to do is basically, of course, go out and make it happen for themselves. That's basically what it is.
Find a way to buy a house.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, if they don't have the deposit, get it from their friends, family members, put something together and just buy something. Get into the market. Don't wait.
Pat Singh sells to buyers who know how Australia's tax system benefits investors. They can claim a negative gearing deduction while they're paying interest on their mortgage, and they pay lower capital gains tax when they sell. It means investors can afford to pay more for a house up front than people who are looking for a home to live in.
I think we need to step back a bit from the politics, examine the core problems. There's a perfect storm of factors out there that's causing the housing affordability problems, and one contributor to the problem is the negative gearing nexus with the capital gains tax discount.
The government has been facing a political fight over housing taxes, even from within its own ranks.
What advice would you give to a young person who wants to buy a house in a capital city but doesn't have rich parents?
Well, unfortunately, the best advice would probably be to buy a lottery ticket, because I think you're just locked out of the market.
Oh, yeah, how you going?
John Alexander,
yeah,
how are you? Candidate for Benelong?
John Alexander is under pressure from voters and his electorate to do something to make housing more affordable. But he's not having much luck convincing his party leadership.
Prime Minister, your colleague, John Alexander, has obviously called for a debate on negative gearing. Will you turn to him and say that's not going to happen?
Well, there is a debate on all of these issues, and John has made a very constructive and informed contribution to it.
I would love to see the government announce a review of the negative gearing arrangements, but I doubt that's going to happen. I think we are only 4 weeks out from the budget, and the noises out of the government are not particularly constructive there.
The Institute of Company Directors, which represents Australian business leaders, says rejigging negative gearing and capital gains tax won't pull the floor out from under the property market.
I don't think you'd see much impact at all. I think the core problem is we still don't have enough homes. So I think certainly some parts of the inner city apartment markets would be exposed, but I think the broader market would still probably rise in price because we simply have an excess of demand over supply of housing.
The Reserve Bank governor also believes investors alone aren't to blame. A lack of houses is the bigger problem.
I find it hard to escape the conclusion that we need to address the supply side if we are to avoid ever-rising housing costs relative to our incomes and to avoid the intended incentive to borrow that's created by rising asset prices.
Yet there's evidence that in parts of Australia, Even in the centre of our big cities, homes owned by investors are sitting empty. You've looked at the water usage of areas like this.
Yes.
So what has that shown about the occupancy in these types of areas of Melbourne?
Yeah, so there's a lot of accommodation that's vacant in the high-rise apartment blocks in Melbourne. That's a lot of people that aren't using much water per day, and that's how we work out how many properties are vacant.
So what, people are just buying them and letting them sit empty?
Well, the yields are so low in Melbourne. I mean, yields in Melbourne are at record lows, around 2.8 to 3%.
So that's how much money you can make by renting them?
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's your earnings from the property. And so the only reason that people really buy property in Australia is to speculate on the capital growth. There's no reason to buy property to actually get a rental yield out of it. Because if you take a bird's eye...
Prosper Australia, an economic research group that's pushing for land tax reform, has found that up to 80,000 properties in Melbourne alone have nobody living in them. So potentially 80,000 properties around Melbourne sitting empty, but the government and the Reserve Bank governor last night all say it's a matter of supply and demand. What do you think about that?
It's poor research. And they should look far closer at the figures. They should be looking at our reports, and they should be looking at some of the other studies that other people have done which back up the data that we've shown.
So the Reserve Bank governor's wrong?
The Reserve Bank governor is wrong.
I think the Reserve Bank's in a bit of a bind here in that the one side, inflation's still well below target, growth in the economy is below trend. So you could make a case that perhaps interest rates should go down again, but on the flip side, officials know that if they lowered interest rates again, it'd pour fuel on that housing market fire.
In the last week, investors have had their wings clipped. The regulator, APRA, has put the brakes on the banks, setting a new cap on loans to borrowers who only pay back the interest. This will mostly target investors. And the banks have raised interest rates for investors. But one of them isn't worried yet.
Here, Melbourne, all this property is going every year.
They're still going up?
Yeah, it's still going up.
Can it go up forever, do you think?
I think.
You hope?
I hope.
All right, there you go. I'll just pop this one out.